guys, so as you can see, I decided to do another video. Last week I posted my first video. In the past I've written things like blog style, but randomly I thought it'd be cool to do a vlog instead, and so I did that for the first time last week. You guys watched it, which was absolutely incredible, and then yeah, I just really had fun, got some great feedback from you guys, so I thought I'd keep going with it. But one of the suggestions that I got was to keep it a little bit shorter. So the last video was like 24 minutes, I think, which looking back on it is kind of long. And so instead of posting like one longer video a week, what I'll probably try and do is post 2 or 3 even shorter videos. So we're going to shoot for 10 or 12 minutes. This one might be a little longer just because I'm kind of like introing it and saying all of that, but moving forward we're going to shoot for 10 to 12 minutes, so definitely let me know what you guys think about that. I do feel like 10 to 12 minutes is a whole lot easier to find in your day than say 25. I do think if we try and go any shorter, then we're not going to get a really decent devotional out of it, and that is my heart behind these videos, is that they would encourage you guys and inspire you guys to just fall in love with the Lord's Word, and that they could even maybe help lead you in quiet time with God. So I'd love to have you guys go through Joshua with me. I'd love for it to be a discussion. So right now I'm sitting in my room talking to the camera. Doesn't feel like much of a discussion. As you're watching it, may not feel like a discussion, but what I'd really love is to hear from you guys. So if you want to comment or text me, or we could FaceTime or talk on the phone or get coffee, as you guys are reading through Joshua, if you do decide to do that in your quiet time, I would love to hear your thoughts and your insights and what jumps out to you, or what jumps out to you guys from this video, or what you learned, whatever. I just love to hear from you guys. So if you are going to go through Joshua with me in your quiet time, definitely let me know that. So today we're going to keep going in Joshua 6 verses 1 through 5. We're going to try and get through. I know that I picked up at a really random spot, so I picked up at Joshua 5 verse 13 last week, and that was just because that's where I was in my quiet time. And so now we're going to keep going in Joshua 6, but I do realize I have completely ignored the first couple of chapters of Joshua. So let me know what you guys would prefer. Should I go back and start at the beginning and walk through Joshua chapters 1 through 5, or should I keep going in Joshua 6 and kind of go through and finish Joshua and then maybe loop back to the first couple chapters? I don't know. I'm open to whatever. Let me know what you guys think would be best. But let's go ahead and read Joshua 6 verses 1 through 5. It says, "Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, 'See, I have delivered Jericho into your hands, along with its king and its fighting men. March around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout. Then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in.'" So it says, that all of Jericho, the gates were closed, the city was barred up, nobody was coming out, nobody was going in. And then I started thinking back to Joshua chapter 2, it was verses 9 through 11, I think, where Rahab is talking to the Israelite spies, and she's telling them, "We are absolutely terrified. Our whole city is terrified because we heard about the miracle that God did in parting the Red Sea so you guys could walk right through it. And we know that He is God and He is on your side, and we're terrified." And so in light of that, in light of them recognizing God's power and His might and the fact that He was fighting for Israel, it's really interesting that they don't go out and try and seek peace with Israel, right? That's what you would think would be the smart thing to do. Go and try and get on God's side, not stand as enemies to the Lord. But they don't do that. Nobody goes out, nobody comes in, nobody's trying to seek peace. So at first it was like, man, Jericho, you are so foolish. What are you thinking? And then the more I thought through that, the more just convicted I was, because that verse, is our story. It's my story. It's your story. So this verse just shows that Jericho's heart was hardened towards its own destruction. And that's our story, right? If you are a believer, then at the point in time prior to surrendering your life to Christ, your heart was hardened towards your own destruction. My heart was hardened towards my own destruction. We know that unless we accept Christ's atoning sacrifice, and unless he cleanses us of our sin and his righteousness becomes our righteousness, then we are going to spend eternity separated from God, and that's the worst kind of destruction there is. But prior to accepting Christ, prior to the Lord opening our eyes to the glorious light of the gospel of Christ, our hearts were hardened towards our own destruction, just like Jericho's was. And so that was super convicting for me as I'm kind of like judging Jericho, like, what are you guys thinking? It's just a reminder of like, hey Caitlin, you did that at one point too. So verse 2 is probably my favorite verse in these few verses. I just absolutely love it. So it starts off and God is just offering some incredible encouragement to Joshua. So he says, see, I have delivered Jericho. One of the things that I've learned the more I've spent time in the Lord's Word is that tenses matter. So it matters if it's like in present or future and past. A lot of the times it has huge significance. So we know that the Lord doesn't deliver Jericho into the hands of the Israelites until the end of chapter 6. And we're just at the beginning, right? It hasn't happened yet. But here, God's speaking as if it's already happened. He's basically like, hey, Joshua, consider it done. And that would have just been, I think, such sweet encouragement as Joshua is maybe, telling the instructions to the Israelites, because we're, in the following verses, the instructions are crazy. And so as he's telling them these instructions that just really don't make sense, that don't seem wise, or maybe in day 4, day 5 of marching around Jericho, being able to look back on that promise of God saying, see, I have already delivered Jericho into your hands, just would have been such a huge encouragement. And so that's something we can do too, right? When we're in situations that are, just really stretching our patience or stretching our faith or our obedience, we can look back on the promises that God has given us in his word as encouragement. What's also significant about this is, so Jericho would have been considered, or could be considered, the first fruits of Canaan, of the promised land. In Leviticus and Exodus, I think it's in like 23 and 26, we see the Lord kind of institute this idea of the first fruits belonging to him. So it was the first fruits of like an agricultural crop. And he's saying, hey, devote this back to me, give this back to me. In Romans 11, we are told that the first fruits are holy. And so here we see Jericho is the first fruits of Canaan. It's this first city that the Israelites come across, the first city that they have to conquer. And here by the Lord saying, see, I have delivered Jericho. It was designed that Jericho was going to belong to the Lord. There was no question about whether or not Jericho was going to stay with the Canaanites. Like, absolutely not. Being the first fruits of the promised land, it was to be devoted to God. And we see that happen at the end of chapter 6. So we'll definitely talk about it more towards the end. But I just, think that is just such a good reminder. But what I love even more about that is how he says that he has delivered Jericho into the Israelites' hands. So Jericho, like we just said, it belongs to the Lord, right? But what he's saying is, see, Joshua, I'm giving this to you, and in doing so, I'm giving you this beautiful opportunity to turn around and give Jericho right back to me. And he does that knowing that when we give to the Lord, it produces generosity, it fights against things like greed, and so he's just giving the Israelites this beautiful opportunity to do that. And so that would be another thing we could take away from here is, number one, what the Lord's given you, like what you have, it belongs to the Lord. We read that in Psalms, everything is God's. But he's given it to you not so that you can keep it and hoard it and keep it to yourself, but so that you can give it back to him. So your house, your car, your income, your education, your resources, your talents, your gifts, your skills, all of that He's given you that you might devote that back to Him. So I'd love to hear how you guys are doing that already, or maybe you're going to start doing that. I'd love to hear what that might look like for you. You know, it'll look different for a ton of people. It looks different. Like, I doubt it's going to look like it looked for the Israelites. I hope it doesn't. It shouldn't look like it looked for the Israelites. We'll read more in chapter 6. But the idea and the key point is that what God is giving us, we're giving it back to Him, and we're devoting it back to be used for His kingdom. So that, you know, that means tithing our money to our church, or it also means, you know, opening up our home to refugees or homeless people or single mothers, or it means using our skills in a way that furthers God's kingdom. You know, it looks really different, but I'd love to hear what that looks like for you. Okay, so then verses 3 through 5 is when the Lord gives Joshua the instructions of how they're going to conquer Jericho. So He tells them, hey, so I want you to get the priest, I want you to get the ark, and I want you to get the guard, and you guys are going to march around Jericho. So I want you to do that one time for the first 6 days, and then on the 7th day, I want you to march around 7 times, and then the priests are going to blow the ram's horns, everybody's going to shout, and the walls are going to come falling down. So I think we can agree that these instructions seem absolutely absurd. Had Joshua sat down with his military advisors and tried to come up with this plan of how they were going to conquer Jericho, he wouldn't have come up with this, right? Nobody comes up with this but the Lord. It just doesn't make sense in our eyes. So for the first 6 days, they were just supposed to march around this city, and they weren't supposed to make any noise or blow in the horns yet. They're just supposed to march in silence. So I was reading a few different commentaries and some like historical information regarding battles during this time period, and what they were saying was that typically armies would make a ton of noise, and they'd have these battle cries, and they'd be shouting in an attempt to intimidate their opponent with their bravado. But here, God is just telling them to march around Jericho for 6 days in complete silence. They weren't going to fall down because the Israelites were able to like shout really loud and scare Jericho, or they weren't going to fall down because Joshua was going to come up with this incredible plan, or because they were going to fight super well, right? The walls of Jericho were going to fall down because God was going to make it happen in His own strength and in His own power. And the Israelites were just told to obey, to have faith and to obey. So they were going to march around Jericho once a day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, they were going to march around 7 times. And then they would blow the trumpets, everybody would shout, and the walls would fall down. So in total, they were going to march around Jericho 13 times, and that was going to stretch out over a week. God, on the very first day, the very first time, could have brought those walls down like that. Without a doubt, He definitely could have, but He doesn't. Instead, He really tests and tries and stretches and strengthens the Israelites' faith and their patience and their obedience and their willingness to do this for 7 days and march around 13 times. We live in a culture where it's instant gratification, right? And I think a lot of times, I know I am tempted to like pray once and be like, okay God, pray to ask, so like you're going to answer it, right? And He sometimes does that, but we see here in Joshua and in multiple other places in the Bible where He doesn't do it on the first try or the second try. It takes 7 days, it takes 13 times marching around before it's answered, right? And so that is just another like incredible reminder. Maybe you're praying for something. I know I'm praying for several things that I have been praying for so long, and the Lord hasn't answered yet, but this is just incredible encouragement to keep on praying. You know, maybe you're waiting on Him to answer a prayer, you're waiting on Him for something, and it's just, I hope it encourages you guys like it encourages me to keep waiting and to keep asking the Lord and to keep trusting in Him. So in the next verse, in verse 4, the Lord commands that 7 priests carry trumpets out of ram's horns, and then on the 7th day, after they've marched around Jericho 7 times, 13 times total, the priests are going to blow these trumpets. So if you go back to Numbers 13, when God is speaking to Moses on Mount Sinai, one of the things that he tells Moses are these different instances where they're going to blow trumpets. And so there are actually 2 silver trumpets then, but one of the instances that they were supposed to blow trumpets was when they were going to battle. And, the Lord says, blow these so that I might remember and come to your aid. And so here we see God tell them again, hey, on the 7th day, blow these trumpets. I will come and I'll fight your enemies. And it's not that God had forgotten. It's not that God needed to be reminded because he had forgotten or because he wasn't paying attention. But rather, I love how this one commentator said it, Matthew Henry. He said, God desires that where he intends mercy, we ask for it. And so blowing these trumpets, God had intended to help the Israelites. And so he's, inviting them to ask for that help that he wants to give. In the New Testament, we're told we do not have because we do not ask. And I think sometimes it's so easy to forget to ask the Lord for mercy and for help when he's there just saying like, hey, I want to give, I want to help, just ask me for it. So another key thing, back in Numbers 13, the trumpets that they were blowing, they were silver, whereas here the trumpets that they're blowing are made out of ram's horns. And so apparently ram's horns just would have been like super dull, super bare, like nothing fancy like silver. And again, we just see this beautiful reminder, even down to the kind of trumpets that they use, that nothing the Israelites are doing is spectacular. It's not incredible, it's not beautiful, it's not like, whoa, this is how they won, right? It's bare, it's dull, it's crazy, it doesn't make sense. But the reason that those walls fall down is because of God, and he uses these ordinary people, these ordinary instruments, and these seemingly crazy instructions to do the impossible and to perform this miracle of bringing down the walls. These were the weapons that the Israelites used to sound the alarm so that everybody would know to shout, and then once they shouted, the walls would fall down. And so, we as believers, we don't wage war with weapons of the world. We don't use the same weapons that the world does. Okay, and then the last point that I want to make, and I think this one would probably be more of the theme of these verses if we had to pick a theme, is kind of pulling back and looking at the bigger picture. So we've looked at a couple of these smaller details, learned some things from them, but let's look at the big picture now. So the instructions that God gives Joshua and the instructions that he gives the Israelites as to how Jericho's walls were going to fall down, all the Israelites had to do was to have faith in God and to obey. Jericho was going to be delivered into their hands. There was going to be deliverance. There was going to be salvation from their enemies just because they had faith in God, and then God was going to work and fight on their behalf, and it was because of what he did that they would be saved. Guys, that applies so much to us. That's the gospel right there. That is a beautiful foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. The only way that we're delivered, right? The only way that we get salvation, it's not because of anything we do. It's not because we come up with this really great plan or this really great strategy, or because we say the right things, or because we have really good battle cries, or whatever it is, because we use these fancy instruments. It's not because of any of that, just like it wasn't because of anything that the Israelites did. The only reason that we are saved is because of what God has done through Jesus Christ. The only reason that the Israelites are saved is because of what God did for them. And their only thing that they had to do, their only role in their salvation, was by having faith. And so if you are not a believer, that's what I want to encourage you guys with. Or if you are a believer, but you definitely know people who aren't a believer in your life, I just challenge you guys to encourage them with this. They are not going to save themselves. They cannot come up with a strategy or some prayer. They can't, say a prayer a certain amount of times or give a certain amount of money. Every single religion, even some forms of Christianity, like to come up with, hey, if you do this and if you say this and you give this, then you're going to have salvation. And that is false. It is not true. the only way that we have deliverance from sin, the only way that we have salvation, our only part in that is faith in God and faith in Jesus Christ and his atoning sacrifice on the cross. Just like the only reason that those walls fell down, that Jericho's walls came tumbling down, was because of the Israelites' faith. The walls did not fall down by force, they fell down by faith. So that is what I want to leave you guys with today. I hope you've learned something. Comment and let me know what your favorite part was, or your favorite verse, or maybe something you thought of, or if you've just been reading Joshua on your own, like I challenge all of you guys to do and invite all of you guys to do. Comment and let me know something that has stuck out to you recently. In the next video that will hopefully come in a couple of days, we'll be continuing to talk about Joshua 6, when the Israelites actually go out and put the Lord's instructions to the test. Bye guys, I love you so much, and I hope you guys have an incredible week.